Welcome to Human Monsters. Part 1. Elliot Rodger. Elliot Oliver Rodger was born in London, England, to Peter and Chin Rodger. Peter was a successful photographer and director in film and television. He worked as the second unit director on The Hunger Games and made a documentary called Oh My God. The family was wealthy and well-connected in British society. Elliot's mother, Chin, was born in Malaysia. She was a very attractive woman who also had connections in the film industry. She even dated George Lucas. The family moved to the countryside after Elliot's birth, and his father was now so successful that Chin was able to quit her nursing job and became a stay-at-home mother, assisted at times by her mother, who lived with the family. Elliot presented with impaired social skills, evident when he was a toddler. He was placed in a private preschool, and he was uncomfortable around other children. He was distressed by the change in routine and cried constantly at the outset. He tried playing soccer, but was uncomfortable in the presence of boys who were larger and more agile. He would stand by the goalie, awaiting any situation where he could be helpful. He was far more maladaptive outside the home, and his happiest memories from childhood involved time spent with family, like flying kites with his father, who did most of the legwork. The family did a lot of traveling, which didn't seem to disturb him quite so much. Peter wanted to direct movies. There were not many opportunities to do so in the United Kingdom, so he decided to move to the United States. Elliot was 5 years old when his sister Georgia was born. Elliot was frightened by the idea of moving to America. It wasn't just another country. It was another continent altogether. He would have to adapt. There was no choice. Peter made his decision, and off they went. Elliot eventually got settled and came to enjoy his new life. He considered himself an American and looked forward to the future. He was enrolled in a private school for kindergarten. There, he made his first friend, a girl named Maddie. Ominous in its prescience, he would later sum her up by saying she was, quote, the first female friend I've ever had, and she would be the last. He was happy and carefree, something he later attributed to the lack of sexual awareness endemic to that phase of life. As he noted later, I was completely oblivious of the fact that my future on this world would only turn to darkness and misery because of girls. Elliot and Maddie took baths together. It was the only occasion in his life when he saw a female naked. As he saw it, he peaked at age 5, and it was only downhill from there. He took great pleasure in excluding children he felt were cruel to him from his 6th birthday party. His self-loathing emerged at this time when he went to the park with his father and found he could not self-propel on the swings. His father needed to push him. The other boys didn't need such assistance at that age. Not only was he spiritually weak, but he was small for his age. He was rejected from a Universal Studios ride for being too short. He cried. Elliot Rodger was born a fish out of water and would flounder all his life. He was weak and ill-equipped for self-empowerment. Reflecting on this incident, which, according to him, set the tone for the rest of his short life, he said, little did I know, this injustice was very small indeed, compared to all the things I'll be denied in the future because of my height. Being short and male is certainly nothing to envy. There is even a documentary called S&M, Short and Male. It is available for free on YouTube. I thought I was tall at 5'10", but it turns out that I am of average height for a man. 6 feet or taller is the masculine equivalent of big tits. Elliot was keenly aware of this and was invariably vexed. Elliot's parents divorced when he was 7 years old, and he was not emotionally well equipped to handle the storm following, as it did, a pattern of acrimony in Peter and Chin's relationship. The fighting and its aftermath of dividing Elliot's life into separate homes took a toll on him. In fact, he has said that he never recovered. Divorces can impact a child profoundly. The following effects are quoted from verywellfamily.com. Young children often struggle to understand why they must go between two homes. They may worry that if their parents can stop loving one another, that someday their parents may stop loving them. Grade school children may worry that the divorce is their fault. They may fear they misbehaved, or they may assume they did something wrong. Peter soon met and began cohabiting with a woman named Sumaya. Though it was initially jarring for Elliot to find this woman to be a part of his life, he admired and respected his father for being such a hit with the ladies that he could find a replacement for Chin within a relatively short period of time. His father was a successful man, an alpha, who did not hesitate to pursue the objects of his desire. Elliot enjoyed her company initially because she made an effort to bond with him. His feelings toward her soon turned sour. She began to discipline him, sometimes quite harshly. He felt that since she was only a stepmother, she had no right to tell him what to do. Elliot was considerably shy and struggled to make friends. He would often distract himself with hobbies, like Pokemon, and exploring the natural backdrop of his father's house. As Elliot attended elementary school, his perception of girls was affected by a perpetual state of bewilderment. Reflecting on this, he wrote, "It was as if the girls in elementary school were part of a separate reality. Despite not having much interaction with them, they treated me cordially, as they treated all other boys of my age. This was fair, and I was content with this. I hadn't gone through puberty yet, and so I had no desire for female validation. My 8-year-old self had no inkling of the pain and misery girls would cause me once puberty would inevitably arrive and my sexual desires for girls would develop. Sexual desires that would be mercilessly spurned. Some of the boys in my class would grow up to be embraced by girls, while I would grow up to be rejected by them. But at that moment in time, we were just innocent children growing up together. All innocence is destined to be shattered and replaced with bitter brutality. I was living in ignorant, innocent bliss, and I was happy with it." Elliot's parents became concerned about his mental health. Chin believed he may have had Asperger's syndrome, a variant of autism. His mother cited this as a criterion when requesting more child support. In one legal document, she was quoted as saying, "Elliot has special needs. He is a high-functioning autistic child." Though poorly developed social skills are endemic to Asperger's syndrome, no evidence was ever provided to substantiate her theory that Elliot was autistic. Peter disagreed with this evaluation, though he did concede that he may have suffered from some kind of mental disorder. He noted that he may have had obsessive-compulsive disorder, evident in his tendency to do things like arrange his dinner plate with geometric precision at every meal and wear the same outfit of clothing on a long-term basis. Elliot did suffer from depression, social anxiety, and suicidal thoughts years later, and he received some treatment. As a child, he was upset by being in large crowds to the point that he would cry. He would also be more inclined to convey his thoughts in writing rather than speech. When he did articulate verbally, he was so softly spoken he nearly whispered. His teachers reported that he would not participate in class. If they forced him to become more involved in classroom activity, he would stare into space or focus on an object. If he heard a loud noise, he would cover his ears and say the words "great" and "cool" as a mantra until he became settled. This led others to assume he had Asperger's. He spent recess hiding behind the building, waiting for the bell to ring, so that he could be safe inside his class once more. The obsessive-compulsive tendencies emerged at school, where he would get upset if all the objects on his desk were not arranged according to his preference. It extended to food, which he would not eat if sauce were part of the formulation. He wouldn't eat anything described as gooey, like melted cheese. He hated going to children's birthday parties, where he would refuse to eat anything and abstained from participating in games and other activities. Elliot's biggest concern at this time in his life was that he was still short for his age. He was the shortest boy in class, which was profoundly humiliating for him. He began to play basketball, believing that merely by dint of playing the sport, his body would accelerate the growth process. He mostly played alone, at public courts, or by himself at home. He would sometimes lay on the ground and engage in stretching exercises in hopes that he would grow taller. Another issue regarding his body that amounted to a great deal of sadness and frustration was that he noticed boys his age could throw a ball farther. He was weaker, and this added to his insecurities. He had one friend named James, but he only enjoyed his company when their playdates were restricted to the two of them. If James invited other kids to participate, Elliot would retreat to a corner and cry. Elliot's budding Napoleon complex, misanthropy, and misogynistic rage were taking root at this time, as he wrote, "Jealousy and envy. Those are two feelings that would dominate my entire life and bring me immense pain. The feelings of jealousy I felt at 9 years old were frustrating, but they were nothing compared to how I would feel once I hit puberty and have to watch girls choosing other boys over me. Any problem I had at 9 years old was nirvana compared to what I was doomed to face." Elliot preferred being with his mother, who was always kind to him, not to mention permissive. Life at Peter's home was not nearly as pleasant. At his father's place, Sumaya was always forcing him to follow rules and punishing him when he didn't. His father was so busy with his career that he wasn't there quite as often. Elliot cried when his mother dropped him off at his father's house. Elliot began to contemplate the inequities of human society. Some people have advantages over others, with some being congenital and others acquired. He didn't want to be someone who was overlooked or viewed as inferior and treated with contempt. He wrote about this. When I became aware of this common social structure in my school, I also started to examine myself and compare myself to these cool kids. I realized with some horror that I wasn't cool at all. I had a dorky hairstyle. I wore plain and uncool clothing, and I was shy and unpopular. I was always described as the shy boy in the past, but I never really thought my shyness would affect me in a negative way, until this point. I envied the cool kids, and I wanted to be one of them. I was a bit frustrated at my parents for not shaping me into one of these kids in the past. They never made an effort to dress me in stylish clothing or get me a good-looking haircut. I had to make every effort to rectify this. I had to adapt. Elliot rectified this state of affairs by bleaching his hair blonde. It was effective in getting attention from others. He was nervous about how it would be received at school. To his relief, a few kids told him it looked awesome. The ones who didn't comment on it still noticed. With this as validation, he now felt he was cool. He stopped playing Pokemon because he had become aware that it was considered uncool. It was certainly too nerdy for the in crowd. Many of the cool boys were into skateboarding, so he decided to take up the sport. He practiced alone for hours so that he would not come across as incompetent in front of other skaters. During the summer between the 4th grade and 5th, he decided to transform himself into the coolest kid around. He continued with skateboard practice and even persuaded his friend James to skate with him. He bought a wardrobe of clothing that was trendy for skateboarders at the time. He hoped to become highly popular when starting the school year. As he recounted, "For the first week of 5th grade, I was at my mother's house. I considered myself to be very cool by now. I had gotten better at skateboarding. I had blonde hair, and I dressed like a skateboarder. I felt great anticipation for what the cool kids would think of me once they saw my transformation. To my disappointment, no one really cared. They were all in their own worlds. I don't remember any kids showing recognition of my new coolness." It was not completely in vain. He made some new friends, a few of whom would have been considered popular. Still, he was not the rock star of the playground, as he had hoped. His mother would drive him to a skate park so he could work on his technique. He dreamed of becoming a pro skateboarder, famous with rabid fans, girls among them. Meanwhile, when he became friends with somebody who was popular, he only viewed them as competition for social status. Sumaya forced him to spend time with some neighborhood kids, but he did not welcome these efforts, and they did not yield the desired results. She would force his hand by locking him out of the house until he befriended the kids. He would spend that time hiding out in the woods and return later claiming he had met someone. They were the kind of kids he wanted to be and emulated, cool skaters, but he wasn't ready to jump into that pool head first. Sumaya was fed up with this and got a nanny to approach the kids and ask them if they would include Elliot. The kids were receptive and even accepted him into their circle. However, he only did it for one day to get Sumaya off his back. Socially speaking, elementary school was still disappointing, even if he wasn't as invisible as he was in previous years. Elliot began to worry about the cold-blooded cruelty of junior high. He knew he would be expected to have some experience with girls, as everybody would have entered puberty by then. He deeply feared the consequences of not having a girlfriend in middle school. As he explained it, "As children, we all play together as equals in a fair environment. Only after the advent of puberty does the true brutality of human nature show its face. Life will become a bitter and unfair struggle for self-worth, all because girls will choose some boys over others. The boys who girls find attractive will live pleasure-filled lives, while they dominate the boys who girls deem unworthy. Matt Bordier, a popular kid at school, will go on to live a life of pleasure. Girls will throw themselves at him, and I will go on to be rejected and humiliated by girls. At that moment in time, we were just playing together as children, oblivious to the fact that my future will be dark and his will be bright. Life is such a cruel joke." Elliot was not as proficient at skateboarding as he'd hoped. He noticed that some younger boys were able to do more tricks than him, further chipping away at his self-esteem. He became so angry about this failure that he gave up on skateboarding. Elliot was so nervous on his first day of middle school, he was shaking. He didn't know any of the students. He tried to adopt a facade of confidence, but it was transparent. He observed that there were two groups of boys, those who were good at skateboarding and the guys who were good at picking up girls. It didn't help that he didn't fit into either camp, and, worse, the girls were taller than him. He hated the in-crowd, and this enmity would begin to bleed into his perception of the human race as a whole. Everything my father taught me was proven wrong. He raised me to be a polite, kind gentleman. In a decent world, that would be ideal. But the polite, kind gentleman doesn't win in the real world. The girls don't flock to the gentleman. They flock to the alpha male. They flock to the boys who appear to have the most power and status. And it was a ruthless struggle to reach such a height. Elliot surmised that the only way to get girls was to be cool, but he also viewed women as morons who are drawn to the wrong kind of guy. Unsure of how to make himself more appealing to females, he became shyer and more withdrawn. Sometimes a popular girl would be nice to him, and he would be on cloud nine when it happened. But his contempt for the in crowd remained. As far as the girls were concerned, he didn't even orbit the outskirts of the friend zone. At one point, he went to a school dance. Some of the girls danced with him, noticing he was shy and too apprehensive to ask a girl to dance. He enjoyed having this physical contact with girls for the first time in his life. He remembered it fondly, the only time in his life when he had positive interactions with girls. As far as a long-term impact, some of the friendlier girls would give him a hug and say hello from time to time, but that was about it. This was not nearly enough for him. He wanted to be popular. He became friends with a boy named Connor. Connor bullied him, but at least he was a friend, so Elliot tolerated the abuse. The friendship was pleasant enough until Connor visited Elliot at his mother's house and told everyone at school that Elliot was poor. Elliot went into damage control mode, telling everyone that his father was rich. He even showed them a photo of his father's house. It alleviated the bullying. His desperation to rehabilitate his image smacked of desperation, though, and it didn't help his reputation in the long run. Elliot struggled with in-person social interaction, which is why he was so delighted with the internet. He created an AOL account and began his voyage of discovery. He would meet and chat with people from all over the world, and it was more comfortable for him, since he didn't have to contend with human beings in the flesh, which he found far more stressful. One person he encountered sent him pornographic photos of women. Elliot was disturbed by this and ceased all contact with the man. As much as he wanted a girlfriend, his desire was more for social acceptance than for companionship and sexual gratification. Seeing what women looked like without their clothes was disturbing for him. What scared him about 7th grade was that he still wanted to be a child. Teenagers and adults cared about things that were not important to him. Over the summer, Elliot didn't leave his home much, not even to see James. He was mostly holed up in his room playing his Xbox. He went to summer camp. One day, some of the kids subjected him to a tickle torture. Once it was over, he accidentally bumped into a girl. She swore at and pushed him. He was deeply troubled by the incident as he reflected. I couldn't believe what had happened. Cruel treatment from women is 10 times worse than from men. It made me feel like an insignificant, unworthy little mouse. I felt so small and vulnerable. I couldn't believe that this girl was so horrible to me, and I thought that it was because she viewed me as a loser. That was the first experience of female cruelty I endured, and it traumatized me to no end. It made me even more nervous around girls, and I would be extremely wary and cautious of them from that point on. I felt relieved when summer camp ended. That experience with the mean girl ruined it for me. Hell, it ruined a part of my life. Whenever I think about summer camp, I would think about that girl, and my emotions would flare up. Elliot became friends with a boy named John Joe. John Joe introduced Elliot to a cyber cafe called Planet Cyber. Elliot would visit the cafe frequently, mostly to play online games. The internet and Elliot Rodger would soon become a love affair. He was especially fond of playing role-playing games, which were interactive among users. Elliot became friends with another boy whose name was Charlie. The trio would go to Planet Cyber together. These experiences he would rank as being among the best of his life. When he returned to school, he didn't enjoy nearly as much camaraderie. It was the same old story, with his awkward social output and his hatred of the popular kids. Elliot's standards for other human beings exceeded his status in society. He didn't want to be judged, but he was always judging others. He didn't just want a coterie of friends. He wanted his companions to be part of the in-crowd. He didn't want to date just any old girl. She had to be blonde and beautiful, a living Barbie doll. He continued to frequent Planet Cyber, with his circle now including a boy named Elijah. Other social activities were difficult for him. Going to movies reminded him of how unsatisfying his social life was, especially when he saw couples. Elliot was a late bloomer who had still not entered puberty by this point. As he reflected, I barely even knew much about what puberty was. With puberty, my whole world would change, and my entire life would collapse into utter despair. I wonder how I would have handled things if I knew. In 8th grade, Elliot continued to feel marginalized. Meanwhile, his social circle was dwindling. His friends lost interest in Planet Cyber and befriended others. Meanwhile, Elliot sought refuge at Planet Cyber, playing online games like Diablo 2 and World of Warcraft. One day a man was watching a porn video on his screen. Elliot happened to look over, and he was disgusted by what he saw as the reality of sexual intercourse. He was so disturbed he cried on his way home. It was traumatic for him. He wrote about the experience. This was among the very first glimpses I had of sex. Finding out about sex is one of the things that truly destroyed my entire life. Sex. The very word fills me with hate. Once I hit puberty, I would always want it, like any other boy. I would always hunger for it. I would always covet it. I would always fantasize about it. But I would never get it. Not getting any sex is what will shape the very foundation of my miserable youth. This was a very dark day. Boys his age were talking about sex on the regular, and it didn't make it easier for Elliot to digest. Elliot asked his father for a subscription to World of Warcraft for Christmas. For some, the game becomes a welcome escape from life, as it would be for Elliot. For these people, World of Warcraft is a lifestyle. Every available moment is spent playing the game. As Elliot recalled, after almost a month went by after getting World of Warcraft, I was finally able to play it. I made a WoW account with my father, and then I created my first character, a night elf druid. It really blew my mind. My first experience with WoW was like stepping into another world of excitement and adventure. It was a video game world, but they made it so realistic that it was like living another life, a more exciting life. My life was getting more and more depressing at that point, and WoW would fill in the void. It felt refreshing and relieving. I was only able to play it for a few hours for my first session. It was all I would think about when I wasn't able to play it. This was a world unto itself, and it was inhabited by real people, chatting in real time. He soon made friends in the WoW world, and it compelled him to ask his parents for a computer of his own. Until he got one, he would spend days on end at Planet Cyber. The proprietor came to regard Elliot as his favorite customer. He had given real-life social interaction a shot, and it didn't pan out. World of Warcraft offered an environment where he would find acceptance, and he embraced it without reservation. It got to the point where when life called him away from WoW, he felt sidetracked. The rest of life was downtime between game sessions. He would reach game-related milestones, and for the first time in his life, he felt he was accomplishing something. He was somebody in the realm of WoW. When school intruded on his WoW schedule, he would behave strangely sometimes, just because it would attract attention. He was shocked that his classmates began to ridicule him for this. Even the girls made fun of him. Their words cut the deepest. He apparently felt that women did not have the right to evaluate him on negative criteria. Commenting on this, he later wrote, "I started to hate all girls because of this. I saw them as mean, cruel, and heartless creatures that took pleasure from my suffering." Peter and Sumaya had a son named Jazz. Elliot was ecstatic about this addition to the family, and he doted on his baby brother. He looked forward to being a mentor to him in the years to come. In the meantime, World of Warcraft was Elliot's #1 priority. Some players value the game more than clean laundry, fresh air, and deodorant. He was still required to stay in school, so he wasn't that far gone. He He could play it for as long as he liked at his indulgent mother's apartment, but Sumaya was a traditional Moroccan who felt that it would serve Elliot better to be a warrior in real life. She would limit the time he spent on it. He resented her for this and wished she would leave him alone. So committed was he to the game that he spent the entirety of spring break at his mother's house so he could play the game until his fingers were calloused and he was nodding off as his body panhandled for sleep. Some would say he had no life, but as far as he was concerned, this was life. He introduced James to the game in hopes that he would get involved. At school, the social dynamic only got worse for Elliot. He hated being bullied, but he felt that negative attention was better than no attention. He would deliberately provoke popular kids with offensive remarks because he enjoyed riling them up. Deep down, he was beset by unresolved anger and depression. He developed a crush on one particular girl, but she bullied him, which broke his heart. He immersed himself in World of Warcraft to distract himself from the pain. He played WoW over the summer almost non-stop. In between gaming sessions, he awaited high school with dread. He would encounter girls as well as boys, which would present many awkward scenarios. He feared he would be judged for being a virgin. He chose to attend a Catholic school, which he felt might shield him from some of the social problems he might suffer in a public school. In the meantime, he was an active member of what is called a guild in World of Warcraft. It's a group of players who organize missions together and assist one another when necessary. He would play from 8 to 10 hours a day. But this would wait. His father announced that they were going to spend a few weeks in Morocco. Elliot hated Morocco. He especially hated the fact that he would not be able to access World of Warcraft there. That was anathema, but he was given no choice. Now his summer would be ruined, followed by the terrors of high school. He was miserable. Due to being a freshman, not to mention short and slight, Elliot was bullied starting from his first week in high school. He was verbally abused and had food thrown at him. He felt he was too weak to fight back, and he became resentful. He only became more determined to dedicate his life to World of Warcraft. He wouldn't even do his homework anymore. He lived for that game. His friend James became a regular player, which added to its appeal. The bullying became more intense. His peers knew he hated being called a skateboarder, so they went out of their way to address him as such. Some took to calling him faggot. They would take things from him and laugh at him as he chased them down. It got to the point where, between classes, he would hide in a corner and wait for the student traffic to thin out before heading to the classroom. Elliot hated Sumaya more than ever. She limited the time he spent on World of Warcraft, the only thing in the world that brought him satisfaction. Puberty, long delayed, finally arrived, and Elliot began to masturbate. This became so frequent his hand was nearly translucent. This was a fleeting pleasure, of course. Fantasizing about having sex only served as a stark reminder that it was still inaccessible to him in reality. Elliot reflected on how he felt about sex and girls at this time. The boys in my grade talked about sex a lot. Some of them even told me that they had sex with their girlfriends. This was the most devastating and traumatizing thing I had ever heard in my life. Boys having sex at my age of 14. I couldn't fathom it. How is it that they were able to have such intimate and pleasurable experiences with girls while I could only fantasize about it? I frequently started asking myself, this was an all-boys school. How in the hell were those boys even able to meet girls to have sex with? I wondered. I hoped they were lying. I hoped against all hope. Hearing that really shook me to the core. Words cannot describe how much hatred and envy I felt for those boys. That hatred would only fester the more I suffered from my sexual starvation. I was too scared to tell anyone about it, and I hid it well, for a time. He continued to play World of Warcraft obsessively, sometimes staying up all night. He even joined another guild. At school, Elliot was a far cry from the warrior persona he adopted for World of Warcraft. He would cry at the end of every day because of the bullying. One day he had a panic attack and his mother had to pick him up. He was frozen in place in a hallway, too frozen and petrified to move. He wept as she drove him home, and he was withdrawn from that school. He didn't fare better at the new school. He was so terrified to begin classes, his father had to drag him out of the car. The bullying was even worse at this school. As Elliot put it, I was completely and utterly alone. No one knew me or extended a hand to help me. I was an innocent, scared little boy trapped in a jungle full of malicious predators, and I was shown no mercy. Some boys randomly pushed me against the lockers as they walked past me in the hall. One boy who was tall and had blonde hair called me a loser, right in front of his girlfriends. Yes, he had girls with him, pretty girls, and they didn't seem to mind that he was such an evil bastard. In fact, I bet they liked him for it. That is how girls are, and I was starting to realize it. This was what truly opened my eyes to how brutal the world is. The most meanest and depraved of men come out on top, and women flock to these men. Their evil acts are rewarded by women, while the good, decent men are laughed at. It is sick, twisted, and wrong in every way. I hated the girls even more than the bullies. Because of this, the sheer cruelty of the world around me was so intense that I will never recover from the mental scars. Any experience I had ever had before never traumatized me as much as this. This was no exaggeration. Every single school day he begged his parents to let him stay home. He cried and trembled as the car approached the campus. Eventually they removed him from this school. Elliot spent a month at home. His parents eventually enrolled him at Independence Continuation High School. It is essentially an alternative school for children who struggle to adapt to the secondary school environment. There were only 100 students at any given time. He was still deeply insecure. He sought validation from teachers at this school 5 to 10 times a day. He only socialized with other students if they initiated the contact. He was disgusted by his fellow alumni, dismissing them as slobs. He only wanted to be surrounded by the rich, the popular, and the beautiful. He was well regarded nonetheless. Still, he preferred to satisfy his social needs with World of Warcraft. Winter 2007. This was a significant period in the histories of Elliot Rodger and World of Warcraft. The variant Burning Crusade was released, and it was a literal game-changer for all participants. Elliot was ecstatic. The upgrade presented an opportunity for him to expand his gaming horizons. Naturally, Sumaya was far less enthused. Not only did she demand that he restrict his time spent gaming, but when he refused to do chores, she would punish him by confiscating his laptop. For someone as committed to the game as Elliot Rodger, this was akin to having his hand chopped off. It was like a brush with death, given that it was his only reason for living. He could still pass the time by masturbating, however. His fantasies were not kinky. He would visualize himself with a blonde girlfriend, with whom he would have the kind of sex that the BDSM crowd would deem vanilla. One night, Peter and his family were invited to a friend's house to have dinner with his family. The friend had teenagers Elliot's age, and they talked about their dating and social lives. Elliot happened to be in earshot, and he had a meltdown. He cried and began to openly contemplate suicide as a complication of his habit of comparing himself to others. Elliot occupied space at school by obligation. Otherwise, it was meaningless to him. He approached any activity outside of World of Warcraft as a waste of time and something to be endured. He wrote about this. It was at this time that I was just beginning to realize, with a lot of clarity, how truly unfair my life is. I compared myself to other teenagers and became very angry that they were able to experience all of the things I've desired, while I was left out of it. I never had the experience of going to a party with other teenagers. I never had my first kiss. I never held hands with a girl. I never lost my virginity. In the past, I felt so inferior and weak from all of the bullying that I just accepted my lonely life and dealt with it by playing WoW. But at this point, I started to question why I was condemned to suffer such misery. There was nothing I could really do about my unfair life situation. I felt completely powerless. In Elliot's senior year, he was biding his time until graduation. He looked forward to the freedoms of adulthood, where he would sequester himself inside the amniotic sac of World of Warcraft indefinitely. Like a fetus, when he emerged in the real world, he was maladaptive and struggled to survive. He even cried. World of Warcraft gave him yet another reason to live, a new version called Wrath of the Lich King. He walked for nearly an hour to Best Buy to purchase a copy. He was an outlier in World of Warcraft when it came to his real-life friends. They didn't invite him to their homes to play as a group. They would create a group online without inviting him. He was deeply hurt. They had deleted him. He was angry, but said nothing for fear that these tenuous friendships would falter altogether. Following this development, he no longer enjoyed World of Warcraft. He would even cry as he played the game. He decided to stop playing it altogether. After all, it's hard to play when tears are blurring your vision. About this time, Elliot was prescribed antidepressants and tranquilizers for his social anxiety, but he was too put off by the side effects to continue taking them. He decided he would rely on logic and positive thinking to overcome his shyness. Despite this, it seemed impossible that girls would ever want to date and/or sleep with him, and he was perplexed. He came to despise people who had sex, both men and women. He was lonely and miserable while other boys his age were enjoying their dalliances with girls. He considered sex to be at fault for everything that was wrong with the world. He decided he would fight back. His anger and desire for retribution was empowering. He didn't feel so weak for once. He began to dream about ways in which he could change the world. One day he told James he felt sex should be outlawed. James agreed on many of his views regarding sexuality. His ideology regarding these matters emerged as he documented in his writings. I formed an ideology in my head of how the world should work. I was fueled both by my desire to destroy all of the injustices of the world and to exact revenge on everyone I envy and hate. I decided that my destiny in life is to rise to power so I can impose my ideology on the world and set everything right. I was only 17. I have plenty of time, I thought to myself. I spent all of my time studying in my room, reading books about history, politics, and sociology, trying to learn as much as I can. I became a new person, furiously driven by a goal. My torment would continue, but I had something to live for. I felt empowered. James wasn't entirely on board with Elliot's anti-sex agenda. He felt that the reason Elliot felt that way was because he was unable to secure his own sexual opportunities. Elliot conceded that he was right, but he didn't waver from his newfound philosophy. The cultural perception of virginity has been shaped by religion, and the outcomes for both genders has been distinctive. Theologians and congregants alike have ascribed numinous virtues to female virginity, such as divinity and moral purity. Even to this day, many religions consider an unchaste female out of wedlock to be of questionable virtues and deserving of contempt. They probably wouldn't like my friend who lost her virginity next to a dumpster. She wasn't even homeless. Religious types sure place a high premium on the hymen. The 9/11 terrorists were promised 72 virgins as a reward for carrying out the attacks. Jesus Christ was born to a virgin whose husband endured a sexless marriage. Speaking of Joseph, virginity has always been a raw deal for men. For the average male, the 18th birthday is a sexual deadline that will determine how he will be viewed as a man, should he disclose that he had his first sexual experience after that day. Except for highly religious men, virginity is something the common teenage male views not as sacred, but as a burden he is anxious to discard ASAP. Elliot Rodger certainly viewed his virginity as something that belonged to a dumpster. It didn't help that though he would go to places that were populated with females, he never made an effort to meet them and ask them out. He seemed to expect the rock star treatment, where they would blow roadies to get backstage passes so they could worship him and cater to his every whim sexually. That wasn't going to happen anytime soon. He was now an incel. The term is a portmanteau of involuntarily celibate. The men who belong to this demographic are a lot like Elliot Rodger in that they make no effort to meet women and then blame them for the lack of sex and relationships in their life. Misogyny is baked into their philosophy and informs much of their online discourse, where they gather and commiserate about their abysmal sexual prospects. The majority of them are male and heterosexual. They have been dubbed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as online male supremacists. They share their struggles while listing their shortcomings. They view women as superficial beings who are drawn to borderline abusive males, while overlooking the incel so-called nice guys. They feel that women owe them sex and are devoid of personal value if they are not serving men in a sexual capacity. It doesn't occur to them that such a stance is undermining their ability to hook up. They are socially isolated, depressed, and lacking in self-esteem, qualities that tend to turn women away. They are not averse to the idea of lashing out in violence against the so-called Chads and Stacys, the terms they give to sexually active men and women. They opine that women and gay men are luckier when it comes to sexual opportunities. As they see it, women are only attached to men who have money and certain genetic markings of a flourishing pedigree. Online discourse has a way of catering to the lowest common denominator, with some people using a cloak of anonymity to express the darkest and most amoral sentiments imaginable. The incel forums are no different, and even encourage their members to express ideas that would be considered unacceptable elsewhere. Two examples of the titles of the threads: I come in Foyd's roommate's shower gel. Why I support the legalization of rape. One member of the forum wrote the following: why even leave the house? Just being around people will make you despise yourself even more. It's an extremely lonely feeling to be around a bunch of people that couldn't give zero fucks about your livelihood, especially the Foyds that see us as beneath them. They'll give you looks of disgust and treat you like absolutely shit. Humans are just pure sociopaths, and evil in general. In the Why I Support the Legalization of Rape thread, one user wrote, first, it is scientifically proven that women are more likely to experience an orgasm during rape. Second, rapists are responding to a demand by women to fulfill their rape fantasies. Third, women feel sexually aroused by the fact a rapist is willing to risk jail to help himself to her pussy. Fourth, raping women is the correct thing to do. There are countless verses in the Quran which basically say it is the divine right of a husband to rape his wife if she doesn't fuck him when he wants. Fifth, it pisses off normies, soy cucks, and feminists. So, what is there not to like about legalized rape? Sixth, it will solve the inceldom crisis. It is for these reasons that I support the legalization of rape. Sometimes the incels take to the forums to lick their wounds. To quote one such person, "My mom says I do the virgin walk. She said I walk like a penguin. That's what I actually thought to myself a few days ago when I saw my reflection while walking, but she fucking confirmed it today. Add that to my ever-growing list of insecurities. So fucking over." There was once an incel forum on Reddit that boasted 40,000 members. It was shut down because of hate speech policies. As the management of Reddit put it, the incel forum, quote, encourages, glorifies, incites, or calls for violence or physical harm against an individual or group of people. The forum didn't ban women from their dialogue, but they did make this declarative statement. Those who continuously claim there are as many female incels in the same situation as male incels will receive a warning and then a ban. Most can agree that women can be incel in some rare situations, such as extreme disfigurement, but their numbers do not come close to male incels. A pivotal moment was when a member pretended to be a woman to get advice on how rapists are caught so that they would know how to get away with it. The following is a glossary of terms used by the online incel community. Beta, the also-rans of the male gender. Some identify as omegas, indicating they are at the bottom of the heap. Chad, everything a woman supposedly wants in a man. He is confident, handsome, dashing, and is bursting at the seams with all the rest of the attributes women find most appealing. Incels dream of being Chads, but if a miracle did happen and they kissed a girl on the lips or more, the Chads of the world as they see it would steal her away from them. Black pill. This is a reference to the movie The Matrix. The notion behind this is their belief that women are only interested in conventional markers of masculine beauty, essentially what incels do not possess. Metaphorically speaking, accepting this reality and the fact that they are doomed to celibacy because of their appearance is the incel equivalent of taking the black pill. It is a matter of ingesting pessimism and curing optimism with despair. Blue pill. The belief that everything is fair in life and that nobody has advantages over anybody else. An incel sees this as a matter of seeing the world through the proverbial rose-colored glasses. Cope. A cope is something that distracts an incel from the misery of their lives, usually their lack of romantic and sexual opportunities. Cuck. A man who is dominated by a Chad. ER. These initials would become significant online as standing for Elliot Rodger. Femoid or foid, a woman. Gym cell, an incel who works out at a gym frequently in hopes of developing a more Chad-like body. Height cell, an incel who is short. It's over, representative of the black pill sentiment, and that all hope is lost and celibacy becomes eternal. MGTOW stands for men going their own way. These men aren't always associated with incels. They just choose not to align themselves with women. MOG, M-O-G, stands for man of the group. The MOG is the incel who is advantaged in comparison to other incels. Elliot Rodger is MOG royalty. Normie, an average and unremarkable person. Race, height, face, money. To quote the manager of one incel website, this is a bit of a debatable topic in the incel community. It simply goes that your race is more important when trying to get relationships than your height, which is more important than your facial appearance, which is more important than how wealthy you are. Some incels disagree on the order of these things. Some disagree they should be put in such a chain at all. Some consider them all equally important. Red pill. To take the red pill is to accept that the world is unfair because women hold all the power and call all the shots. They also believe they can become alpha males by working out, using pickup artist techniques, and treating women like they're subhuman. Rope. Roping oneself is a reference to suicide. Stacy. This refers to women who are attractive, unintelligent, and sexually voracious. They only have sex with chads, according to the incel narrative. Volcel. A person who is voluntarily celibate. Incels view these people with contempt. Incels will reject a man who identifies as such. Wrist cell. A man who has tiny wrists, which incels believe makes him undesirable as a sexual prospect. Though most of these terms and their definitions are laughable, the Texas Department of Public Safety has taken the incel threat seriously. This is a quote from their report released in 2020. Although not a new movement, involuntary celibates, incels, are an emerging domestic terrorism threat as current adherents demonstrate marked acts of threats of violence in furtherance of their social grievance. Once viewed as a criminal threat by many law enforcement authorities, incels are now seen as a growing domestic terrorism concern due to the ideological nature of recent incel attacks internationally, nationwide, and in Texas. What begins as a personal grievance due to perceived rejection by women may morph into allegiance to and attempts to further an incel rebellion. The result has thrust the incel movement into the realm of domestic terrorism. The violence demonstrated by incels in the past decade, coupled with extremely violent online rhetoric, suggests this particular threat could soon match or potentially eclipse the level of lethalness demonstrated by other domestic terrorism types. Elliot Rodger wanted power. The power was he was not charismatic and politically savvy enough to manipulate people into supporting him. He was no Charles Manson, so he would not assemble a clan of impressionable runaways eager to do his bidding. He couldn't even cope with seeing a couple at a food court. How could he take on the man? Elliot drifted, doing nothing constructive with his time following his graduation from high school. At one point, Peter decided that Elliot would accompany Sumaya on yet another trip to Morocco. Elliot hated Morocco and resisted the idea, even throwing a tantrum. He got crafty about avoiding departure, but when he tried to sneak away on the morning of the day's flight, his father caught him. Elliot wrote about his distaste for these trips. The journey to Morocco was the most horrendous travel experience I've ever had. It was just me, Sumaya, and 4-year-old Jazz. Jazz kept screaming and vomiting on the plane. Sumaya was in a sour mood, and I was completely miserable. I thought my whole life was all over. I had nothing to look forward to in the future. I wanted to die. Once I got there, I felt like all of the life in me had drained out. I was so defeated. I couldn't help but cry all the time, even in front of Sumaya's relatives. Khadija, Elliot's grandmother, didn't understand why I was so upset, and she got offended that I was crying on the first day at her house. It was a complete disaster. Elliot was 17 years old and begging his mother in emails sent from Morocco to let him live with her. He promised to pursue a post-secondary education and find a job. He said he was miserable in Morocco and couldn't stop crying. After a week of this, his mother flew to Morocco and brought him home. Elliot was happy for the first few days at his mother's place. Then he remembered the miserable life he had been living. His burgeoning hatred toward couples was burning its way into a raging inferno. He dreamed of punishing those people. One day a car filled with teenagers made fun of him as they drove by. He was sick of being a victim. He partially blamed his father for not teaching him how to mac on women, something at which Peter excelled. He decided initially that the answer was fashion-related. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis. Many believe that clothes make the man, though any woman who has been approached by hundreds of men throughout multiple nightclub visits know that a fashionable outfit on a douchebag is like toilet paper. It's associated with something repulsive and contaminates everything in its path. Elliot got a trendy haircut and some fashionable clothes, nonetheless. His friend James told Elliot that he had also been unsuccessful with women, but he wasn't depressed about it. James could cope with hardships. Elliot would break down and cry if everything was not to his liking. You could call that narcissism. He enrolled in a community college where he anticipated better prospects with women, since nobody would know him there. He had to take the bus to school, which he found demeaning. He grew up in privilege and did not enjoy rubbing elbows with the dispossessed. He also started buying lottery tickets, believing that if he got rich, he would never suffer a dateless night again. Sumaya was so resentful toward Elliot for embarrassing her in front of her family in Morocco that she kicked him out of Peter's house. Even Peter would not allow Elliot to enter his home. Elliot now lived with his mother full-time. Elliot felt betrayed by his father and lost all respect for him. He would frequent public locations and hoped that by sending out a vibe, females would approach him, but they never did. He once learned about a party through Facebook, one to which he was not invited. It was a small gathering put together by people who knew each other, so it became an awkward affair for Elliot, and he soon left. On the way home, some people pelted eggs at him from a vehicle. He threw an egg back. A couple of the passengers got out and advanced toward him, but he was armed with a pocket knife and appeared so insane that they thought better of retaliation and left. There was a gym in his mother's building, and he would work out there, assuming that by building his muscles, he would become more attractive to women. Relations between Elliot and Peter and Sumaya improved enough that he would visit occasionally. Peter decided to teach Elliot how to drive. Though the prospect of this terrified Elliot, he did concede that driving a nice car might help him get women. Elliot's life remained a sexual wasteland in and out of college. Nothing he did ever worked. He had a reunion with Maddie at a party. She was happy and looked to the future with hope. She had developed socially and physically, becoming a woman few men would speak dismissively of. Elliot could only make awkward small talk with her, so he had not fared so well. He dropped out of college. He felt that if he wasn't getting laid there was no point in attending. His mother didn't see it that way. She was furious. She told him that if he didn't get a job, she would kick him out of the house. The problem was, a young man with no experience like Elliot would likely have only been able to work in the service industry. How would he fare against the Karens of the world, screaming in his face out of disappointment with their orders? You can only cry so many times at work before you get canned. He couldn't even cope with seeing a woman with a boyfriend. Customer service would make short work of him. He was simply too fragile. He foresaw a grim future of poverty and slave labor under those circumstances. Elliot would spend countless hours at Barnes & Noble reading philosophy and biographies about impactful historical figures. Sometimes this was spoiled for him when couples made out on the chairs. Writing about this, he said, "Sometimes they would even sit on the reading chairs, kissing and fondling each other. Whenever I saw this, I got so overcome by envy and heartbreak that I went to the bathroom to cry." The chronically devastated don't typically score with the ladies. Sometimes he would hang out with his friend Addison, but they soon fell out. Addison would talk about the life he was living, which was replete with dating experiences. Elliot hated hearing about it and even accused Addison of lying. At one point, he alleged that Addison was bragging about his life to upset Elliot. It wasn't long before Elliot unfriended him on Facebook. Elliot concluded that sex is evil and the most promiscuous of the general population should be persecuted. As he noted, "My hope that I will one day have a beautiful girlfriend and live the life I desire slowly faded away. I was in the same dark and miserable place I had been a year previously. Lonely, unwanted, miserable, and seething with rage at the world. I kept thinking about how some boys were easily able to get girlfriends straight after they went through puberty. I couldn't fathom how they did it, and I hated and despised them for it." He decided it was time to fight back at the world. Elliot's mother continued to pressure him to get a job. The problem was, he felt he was most suited to intellectual work. He wasn't qualified on paper to do it, and he considered positions in the service industry to be beneath him. It wasn't entirely his fault. His parents raised him to believe that he deserved a better quality of life than the general population. He took a position with a friend of his father's, who was a carpenter. It was a short-term contract position, so it was more something to get his mother off his back than a serious career option, as he saw it. There was a confrontation at Peter's house. Elliot entered without knocking and got himself a glass of water. Sumaya was so angry she knocked the glass out of his hand, sending it to the floor. Both Yoko and Peter kicked Elliot out of their house, from which he was permanently banned. Elliot wrote a hateful message to Addison as punishment for saying things he found hurtful. Hitting him where it hurt the most, Addison wrote, "No girl in this whole world will ever want to fuck you." He hit the bullseye. If you wanted to hurt Elliot Rodger, you would take a dig at his failures with women. Elliot hated everybody in his life but his mother. She began to date a wealthy man. Elliot tried to persuade her to marry him. Elliot's reasoning was that the man would outfit him with the trappings of an opulent lifestyle. Chin dismissed these appeals. Once Elliot got his driver's license, his mother allowed him to drive her old car. He decided to enroll in college again. The car gave him a boost to his self-esteem. The girls at the college were gorgeous, and he figured life would be perfect with one of them on his arm. He would stop hating everyone if he had a girlfriend. He was in love with love, and saw it as the panacea for everything that was wrong with him and his life. He was profoundly disappointed. He saw couples everywhere, which filled him with rage. There was a couple in one of his classes, which became an eyesore for him. As he pointed out, "Every day I had to see this, and my envy grew and grew. I constantly glared at them with raw hatred. What did I do wrong that he did right? I yelled out to the universe on the way home, why does he deserve the love of a beautiful girl and not me? Why do girls hate me so? Questions and questions. All I could do was question why I was suffering so much injustice in life." Elliot's mother suggested writing as a career. He took a liking to this idea. He saw it as his key to getting rich, famous, and achieving that Tom Vu level of success, complete with yachts and bikini chicks. He conceived a story about a man who rose from obscurity and persecution to a position of power. His hope was that not only would he become rich, but he might inspire change in society. College kept him writing, though it was not a happy experience because seeing all the couples had him crying on the way home. He quit writing because most writers didn't make enough from their literary output to sustain themselves, and even if they did, the trend was that it didn't happen until after they were 40. He dropped out of college again. His mother had hired a life coach for him, and Elliot consulted the man about helping him secure a job. He got him a job as a janitor. This would not do for King Elliot, so he quit after one day. He was an elitist who felt that such workers were not so much as qualified to tie his shoelaces. Elliot promised his mother he would go back to school and work on his writing. He was now 19 years old and was miserable over summer. He was a virgin, a reality that ate at his guts every day. He struggled to cope with the certainty. On his birthday that year, he received a letter from Peter asking Elliot to apologize to Sumaya. He didn't even respond. Elliot returned to World of Warcraft, feeling he had nothing else to do that was worthwhile. He reconnected with James as a result. James was also still a virgin, and though Elliot was happy about this, he couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that James wasn't angry and bitter about it. Elliot viewed his anger as a strength and fully intended to avenge the world's gumption in denying him those things to which he felt he was naturally entitled. College was disastrous emotionally for him, as before, since there were so many couples. World of Warcraft came out with a new version called Cataclysm, but after 2 weeks of play, he grew tired of it. He felt the designers of the game made it too easy. He also hated that so-called normal people were playing the game, i.e., women and guys with girlfriends. Sometimes male players would describe their real-life sexual encounters in the chats. Occasionally, they used the word virgin as an insult or punchline. He couldn't even rely on World of Warcraft to provide him with the solace he needed in a world that made him feel invariably unwelcome. After the new year, Elliot's parents took him to a Japanese restaurant to discuss his future. They felt he should move into his own place and establish some direction in his life. They felt by letting him live at home, he was only succumbing to his own misery as it fed off itself and came back for seconds. Elliot decided to move to the town of Isla Vista. It was close to Santa Barbara, and he intended to attend classes at Santa Barbara City College. He saw it as a place where he could be active socially and sexually. As usual, he assumed these things would happen to him as a passive recipient, negating initiative on his part. Elliot expected servitude from life itself, dishing out all of its many pleasures as a means to cater to his every whim. He read the following entry on Urban Dictionary about Isla Vista: an almost too good to be true college student playground nestled in fabulous Santa Barbara, where the apartments are absolute shit, yet $650 a month to share a room. At night, Ivy crawls with thousands of piss-drunk students, all walking from house to house, sucking up the greater half of California's vodka supply. Sadly, nearly half of these partygoers are arrested by the Isla Vista Foot Patrol for DIPs, drunken publics. Isla Vista is an overall awesome place to spend your college years. Elliot fell in love with the town and resolved to enroll at Santa Barbara City College. His parents paid his tuition and provided him with a car and a $500 a month spending allowance. He took karate lessons, but gave up when a younger student looked down upon him because he was a white belt and the other student was a brown belt. And of course, when he went with James, who was also in the class, out for a meal afterwards, he saw couples and got angry and depressed. He dropped out of school for that reason. He could not get past his feeling that the relationships of others were something that was being done to him. He didn't tell his mother that he dropped out, and she continued to pay his rent. Elliot moved out of his mother's home and into an apartment he shared with 2 roommates. He decided it wasn't exactly helping his chances with women that he lived with his mother. In the meantime, he continued to work out at his mother's place to build his physique. For a change, Elliot was looking forward to the future. As he wrote, "I am an intelligent gentleman, and I deserve the love of girls more than the other obnoxious boys of my age, and yet they get girls, and I don't. That is a crime that can never be forgotten, nor can it be forgiven. I always wanted to exact my revenge on humanity for forcing me to live such a life. But I've also always had the hope that if I can do things in life to make up for all my suffering, then that in itself would be a form of peaceful revenge. In truth, the move to Santa Barbara was actually a chance that I was giving to the world, not the other way around. I was giving the world one last chance to give me the life that I know I'm entitled to, the life that other boys are able to live with ease. If I still have to suffer the same rejection and injustice even after I move to Santa Barbara, then that will be the last straw. I will have my vengeance." June 4th, 2011. Elliot departed from his mother's home to live on his own for the first time in his life. His father helped him move in. One of his roommates was a tall, handsome, blonde young man, which Elliot resented. Elliot was nervous, but he talked to his roommates and relations were cordial. His first night was rough. Young students partied outdoors. A couple in an adjacent unit had loud sex. For a narcissist who felt the world was rubbing his nose in his failures, this was nearly unendurable. His roommates had a friend named Chance, who was cocky, which also frustrated Elliot. The world wasn't following the rules, and he was incensed. One night, Elliot asked the three of them if they were virgins. They thought this line of questioning was absurd. They had discarded their virginity years ago. Chance lost his when he was 13 years old. Elliot told Chase he was a liar. Elliot was so humiliated, he retreated to his room and cried. He wrote of this incident. How could an inferior, ugly black boy be able to get a white girl and not me? I am beautiful, and I am half white myself. I am descended from British aristocracy. He is descended from slaves. I deserve more. I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said, and it was hard to erase from my mind. If this is actually true, if this ugly black filth was able to have sex with a blonde white girl at the age of 13 while I've had to suffer virginity all my life, then this just proves how ridiculous the female gender is. They would give themselves to this filthy scum, but they reject me? The injustice. In Isla Vista, Elliot became even more assured in his assessment that women were intellectually inferior and profoundly flawed. He saw them with jocks rather than men like him, whom he characterized as intelligent gentlemen. Of course, he would become aware of women who were highly intelligent, even more intelligent than him, and this made him feel even worse about himself. Two new roommates moved into Elliot's apartment, Daniel and Reed. Daniel was especially friendly to Elliot, which he appreciated. Reed was more of an introvert. Elliot dropped out of college once again because there were some popular guys in class who were doing well with girls. He didn't last a day. Waiting for girls to ask him out didn't work either. Driving around Santa Barbara made him feel even worse when he saw all the couples. Elliot's roommates entered his unit through a revolving door since it was always a temporary arrangement custom designed for students. He nervously awaited the arrival of his new roommates in August. One day in summer, his father took him out for dinner. It did not go well. Elliot reflected on this. When we sat down at our table, I saw a young couple sitting a few tables down the row. The sight of them enraged me to no end, especially because he was a dark-skinned Mexican guy dating a hot blonde white girl. I regarded it as a great insult to my dignity. How could an inferior Mexican guy be able to date a white blonde girl while I was still suffering as a lonely virgin? I was ashamed to be in such an inferior position in front of my father. When I saw the two of them kissing, I could barely contain my rage. I stood up in anger, and I was about to walk up to them and pour my glass of soda all over their heads. I probably would have if Father wasn't there. I was seething with envious rage, and my father was there to watch it all. It was so humiliating. I wasn't the son I wanted to present to my father. I should be the one with the hot blonde girl, making my father proud. Instead, my father had to watch me suffer in a pathetic position. Life is so cruel to me. When I said my farewell to Father before he drove home, I felt absolutely miserable. I then went back to my room and sulked for hours. For the first time, Elliot Rodger got his revenge against this sexually active world. One day he went to get a coffee at Starbucks when a couple in line began to make out. He was so outraged, he followed them to the male's car and threw his coffee on it. The man shouted at him, and Elliot ran away. It didn't bring him any lasting satisfaction, since the man was going home with an attractive blonde girl. Just because Elliot was victorious didn't mean he was a winner. He wished he could wreak vengeance on such people with greater power and ability. He wanted to torture them. He wanted to kill them. He wanted to go for the slow kill, dissecting them fragment by fragment. He spent the next 5 days holed up in his room, miserable. He would look out his window and see couples enjoying their time together. He fantasized about invading their rooms as they had sex and stabbing them. Elliot's 20th birthday was approaching and he was still a virgin. With every passing day, that reality became increasingly unbearable. For once, he approached a girl, but she ignored him. He went into a public washroom stall and cried for an hour. While driving around, he spotted a jock making out with a girl. He threw his iced tea on them and drove away. Elliot's new roommates were named Ryan and Angel. To his dismay, they were both Hispanic, and he looked down upon Latinos as being of an inferior race. They also knew each other well, and Elliot was concerned that this would pose a threat of something worse than simply icing him out. One day they invited some friends over, and Elliot joined the others. At one point, somebody asked him point blank if he was a virgin. He was shocked and stunned, but he didn't want to lie about it and came clean, confessing to his inexperience. The other males began to regale him with tales of their sexual conquests. Elliot was apoplectic. He couldn't believe Angel had sex because he considered him to be ugly, while he saw himself as beautiful. He hated Angel. He went back to his room and was so enraged he punched a wall. The following day, Elliot and Angel nearly had a fight. Elliot wrote, "The ugly pig kept acting as if girls thought he was more attractive than me. Ha! I am a beautiful, magnificent gentleman, and he is a low-class, pig-faced thug." I had enough of his cocksure attitude, and I started to call him exactly what he was. I tried to insult him as much as I could, telling him how superior I am to him, and saying that he was low class. He tried to attack me, but Ryan, being the more mellow of the two, held him back. A pity. I was itching for a chance to hurt that obnoxious little animal. Elliot called his mother and told her he could not remain in his then-current living situation. Though she felt he was blowing things out of proportion, she helped him arrange for alternative housing. He was placed in an apartment with only one roommate. In the meantime, he had no choice but to remain where he was for the rest of the month. Ryan and Angel ridiculed him for being a virgin while boasting about their sexual conquests. Elliot despised them. He wanted to murder them both. He would spend his weekends at his mother's home to escape from them. One day, Elliot and James went to a Chinese restaurant. A crowd of young people, males and females, walked in. Under his breath, James said, "We're fucked." He said this because he knew Elliot would flip out after seeing the couples. His maladaptive behavior became a source of frustration for James. Elliot told him he wanted to pour his beverage over one guy's head. James convinced him they should leave. Elliot broke down and cried in front of James later that day. James tried to be sympathetic, but their friendship ended that day. Elliot was just too high maintenance. Elliot continued to experience failures with women and frequent crying jags when they didn't show interest in or approach him. Elliot had a new roommate named Spencer. Spencer was shorter than he and overweight. Despite this, he had a girlfriend. It made no sense to Elliot, and he came to hate Spencer, who had been nothing but respectful to him. Over the Christmas break, Elliot decided to take the tack of adopting the persona of a European gentleman to attract girls. He bought some swanky new clothes, like Armani suits. Evidently, he still viewed women as superficial creatures whose vision was only skin deep. One day, Spencer had his girlfriend as a guest in the apartment. After having sex with her, he passed Elliot, and, from Elliot's point of view, he seemed to be gloating about it. Elliot retaliated by telling him he was a fool for having sex with an ugly whore. He said anybody could, and that he chose not to debase himself like that. Naturally, Spencer was angered by this, and relations between them were damaged. When it was time for Elliot to return to college, he got dressed up in his metrosexual GQ look. Musing about these preparations, he said as a mantra to his mirrored reflection, "I am the image of beauty and supremacy." He fully expected to be noticed when he entered his first class, but nobody cared. One day he spotted two females standing at the side of the road, talking. As he drove by, he smiled at them, but they looked away, unimpressed. He drove back again a few minutes later and threw his latte on them. The only disappointing factor for him was that the latte wasn't piping hot, so they would suffer first-degree burns. He wished he could throw them in a vat of boiling water, where they could scream as their skin melted. Elliot developed a crush on a girl in one of his classes. When he looked her up on Facebook, he discovered that not only did she have a boyfriend, but he was the jock type he most despised. He dreamed of kidnapping them and flaying the skin off the boyfriend's body. He screamed and cried for hours after discovering that she was dating the man. He dropped out of that class. He eventually dropped all his classes. As he saw it, there was no point in doing anything if he couldn't get a girlfriend or get laid. Life looked bleak to him. He foresaw a future where he would always be a virgin. He lost all hope now. He decided that because women chose the guys he considered to be unsuitable, they were all weak and stupid. He felt they shouldn't even have the right to choose their partners. Elliot's resolve to exact revenge against couples became even more pronounced and acute, as he recollected in his writings. It was only when I first moved to Santa Barbara that I started considering the possibility of having to carry out a violent act of revenge as the final solution to dealing with all the injustices I've had to face at the hands of women in society. I came up with a name for this after I saw all of the good-looking young couples walking around my college and in the town of Isla Vista. I named it the Day of Retribution. It would be a day in which I expect my ultimate retribution and revenge on all of the hedonistic scum who enjoyed lives of pleasure that they don't deserve. If I can't have it, I will destroy it. I will destroy all women because I can never have them. I will make them all suffer for rejecting me. I will arm myself with deadly weapons and wage a war against all women and the men they are attracted to, and I will slaughter them like the animals they are. If they won't accept me among them, then they are my enemies. They showed me no mercy, and in turn I will show them no mercy. The prospect will be so sweet, and justice will ultimately be served. And of course, I will have to die in the act to avoid going to prison. When Elliot visited his parents during spring break, he told them his life was just wonderful. When he returned to his apartment, he settled into a life of nothing. No school, no friends, no girlfriend. He didn't even play World of Warcraft anymore. His new obsession was with getting rich. He figured that he could throw money at his problems, and they would be solved. If he became a millionaire, the women would come out of the woodwork. He didn't want to work for it because that could take years. He started buying lottery tickets. He felt he was entitled to the winnings because of all he suffered through. He didn't win, and this made him feel even more hopeless about his life and future. His depression plunged him into even darker depths of despair. His hatred for women swelled beyond its recent dimensions. He saw himself as a victim of their lack of interest. One day he was at a park when some couples were spending time there. The males were kicking a ball around, and the girls were sunbathing. Elliot was so enraged at them, he drove to a Kmart and bought a super soaker, which he filled with orange juice. He would have preferred to fill it with boiling hot oil. He drove back to the park and started squirting the juice at the couples. The girls shouted at him. Their boyfriends did the same and chased him, but Elliot was too fast for them and drove away before they could catch up. He continued to play the lottery without success. On one occasion, the Mega Millions jackpot was at $100 million. He was so confident he could win that when he didn't, he slashed at the air with a knife before crying himself to sleep. Elliot continued to devise his day of retribution. He went to a shooting range and rented a gun. He figured he might as well practice shooting so that he would know what he was doing when he lashed out at the coupled and beautiful. He didn't enjoy shooting. In fact, it made him physically sick. He asked himself why he had to do it. He wondered why life was so unfair that he had to kill himself. He wrote his feelings down. Within the following days, I spent a lot of time at the park, watching the wind blow through the trees and the children playing in the fields. I questioned the very fabric of reality. Why did this all exist? I wondered. How did life come to be? What was the nature of reality? What was my place in all of it? There was no point to my life anymore. I was never going to lose my virginity. I was never going to get a girlfriend. Because girls are repulsed by me, I was never going to have children and pass on my genes. The only way that I could have been worthy enough to beautiful girls is if I become wealthy at a young age, and the faith I had in that happening had just been crushed. There was no hope left. The life I could have had ceased to exist. I will never have sex, never have love, never have children. I will never be a creator, but I could be a destroyer. Life had been cruel to me. The human species had rejected me all my life, despite the fact that I am the ideal, magnificent gentleman. Life itself is twisted and disgusting, I mused. Humans are brutal animals. If I cannot thrive among them, then I will destroy them all. I didn't want things to turn out this way. I wanted a happy, healthy life of love and sex. But if I'm unable to have such a life, then I will have no choice but to exact revenge on the society that denied it to me. Elliot had new roommates in September, John and Chris. They didn't offend Elliot by having sex lives. They mostly stayed at home and played video games, so Elliot didn't mind tolerating their presence. He registered for classes but did not pay tuition when his parents sent him the money. He kept it for his own personal use. Elliot was living in his own world now. He spent his time fantasizing about being wealthy when he wasn't visualizing himself killing the beautiful people. He wanted to be something supreme, beyond a king or world leader. He wanted to be a godhead. He didn't want his roommates to know he wasn't attending classes, so he spent his days reading at a library. He continued to buy bum lottery tickets and suffer his way through aimless drives when he would spot couples who made him cry and want to kill them. This was Elliot Rogers' life. He called his parents and told them how ashamed he was about his lack of success with the opposite sex. They became concerned and told him they would like him to undergo counseling when he returned home. That was not his plan. It was not his solution. He had something else in mind. He bought a Glock 34 semi-automatic pistol. He liked the way it felt in his hand. It made him feel like an alpha male. He finally stopped buying lottery tickets after too many losses. With the money he did have, he purchased another gun. It was a SIG Sauer P226. He spent time with his little brother Jazz on weekends at his father's house. He was dismayed to see that Jazz was athletic and had finally honed social skills. It appeared he would grow up to be the kind of male Elliot despised. He viewed him as being luckier than him. Elliot wrote more about the people he hated the most. All I had ever wanted was to love women, but their behavior has only earned my hatred. I want to have sex with them and make them feel good, but they would be disgusted at the prospect. They have no sexual attraction towards me. It is such an injustice, and I vehemently questioned why things had to be this way. Why do women behave like vicious, stupid, cruel animals who take delight in my suffering and starvation? Why do they have a perverted sexual attraction for the most brutish of men instead of gentlemen of intelligence? I concluded that women are flawed. There is something mentally wrong with the way their brains are wired, as if they haven't evolved from animal-like thinking. They are incapable of reason or thinking rationally. They are like animals, completely controlled by their primal, depraved emotions and impulses. That is why they are attracted to barbaric, wild, beast-like men. They are beasts themselves. Beasts should not be able to have any rights in a civilized society. If their wickedness is not contained, the whole of humanity will be held back from advancement to a more civilized state. Women should not have the right to choose who to mate with. That choice should be made for them by civilized men of intelligence. If women had the freedom to choose which men to mate with, like they do today, they would breed with stupid, degenerate men, which would only produce stupid, degenerate offspring. This, in turn, would hinder the advancement of humanity. Not only hinder it, but devolve humanity completely. Women are like a plague that must be quarantined. When I came to this brilliant, perfect revelation, I felt like everything was now clear to me in a bitter, twisted way. I am one of the few people on this world who has the intelligence to see this. I am like a god, and my purpose is to exact ultimate retribution on all the impurities I see in the world. Elliot discovered a website called PUAHate.com. It stands for Pickup Artist Hate. It was popular with angry, sexually disenfranchised men who were angry at women for not sleeping with them. The way its visitors saw it, women only date men with big muscles and millions of dollars, while the incels of the world are left to marinate in self-pity. Elliot was very active in the site's forums. He encouraged other incels to fight back at the sexually appealing people of the world. On one occasion, he wrote, "One day incels will realize their true strength and numbers and will overthrow this oppressive feminist system. Start envisioning a world where women fear you." Summer came and, as usual, to loosely quote Rimbaud, it was a season in hell when Elliot observed couples in public doing what he felt was his birthright simply by dint of existing. Meanwhile, the day of retribution continued to germinate in his mind. Elliot wanted to kill as many young women as possible, and he wanted to do it in the town of Isla Vista, where he moved before attending college. He saw himself as a victim, and he wanted to overturn his status. He settled on November 2013 as the date of departure for his victims. He was worried about getting killed, but he decided that living without a woman in his life was a fate much worse than eating a few bullets. That was 5 months away. In the meantime, he would wait for women to redeem themselves. If a woman would come to her senses, he reasoned, and have sex with him, they could prevent a tragedy. His parents hired a counselor to coach him on his social skills. It went well as they walked the streets of Isla Vista until Elliot asked his coach if he had sex with anybody in Isla Vista. When he said he had, Elliot became enraged. He felt his coach was too average-looking to deserve such a privilege. Elliot reflected on the state of his life as he contemplated the deaths of others and his own, escorted to the grave by his hand. I felt so shocked and overwhelmed upon realizing that I was definitely going to resort to this. I was going to die soon, and that in itself was hard to accept. I didn't want to die, but I would have no choice. Vengeance is the only path. All other paths had been closed shut. I thought it to be such a tragedy that I was actually going to wage war against women and all of humanity. But then again, women's rejection of me was a declaration of war. They insulted me by deeming me inferior of their love and sex, They hate me, and I will return that hatred 1,000-fold. I will inflict suffering on everyone in Isla Vista, just like they have made me suffer. In the past, I have always been at their mercy, and I was given none. On the day of retribution, everyone will be at my mercy, and in turn, I will show them no mercy at all. My retribution will be so devastating that it will shake the very foundations of the world. One day when Elliot visited his father's house, Sumaya informed him that Jazz signed on with an agent to become a child actor. She also foresaw that he would be popular with females in the years to come. This made Elliot's blood boil. He decided that Jazz would have a starring role among the bodies that would pile up on the day of retribution. He still loved Jazz, but he couldn't stand the idea of being upstaged by him. Elliot also considered Sumaya as a future corpse. She had been his nemesis for years, so her death wouldn't trouble him much. He wouldn't be able to kill his father. He would plan to commit the murders when he was not at home. Elliot's new roommates moved in, and he was disgusted with them. As he noted, they were two foreign Asian students who attended UCSB. These were the biggest nerds I'd ever seen, and they were both very ugly with annoying voices. My last two housemates, Chris and John, were nerds as well, but at least they were friendly and pleasant. These two new ones were utterly repulsive, and one of them had a very rebellious demeanor about him. He went out of his way to start arguments with me whenever I raised the issue of the noise he made. Hell, even living with Spencer was more pleasant than these two. I knew that when the day of retribution came, I would have to kill my housemates to get them out of the way. If they were pleasant to live with, I would regret having to kill them. But due to their behavior, I now had no regrets about such a prospect. In fact, I'd even enjoy stabbing them both to death while they slept. On New Year's Day, Elliot awaited 2014 as the year of this day of retribution. He wrote about it. I have been rejected, insulted, humiliated, cast out, bullied, starved, tortured, and ridiculed for far too long. Humanity is a cruel and brutal species, and the only thing I could do to even the score was to return that cruelty 1,000-fold. Women's rejection of me is a declaration of war, and if it's war they want, then war they shall have. It will be a war that will result in their complete and utter annihilation. I will deliver a blow to my enemies that will be so catastrophic it will redefine the very essence of human nature. He decided that April 26, 2014 would be the date of the day of retribution. His plan was to lure people into his apartment on the 25th, where he would torture them. He would start by whacking them over the head with a hammer. Other tortures would include pouring boiling water over them, flaying them, severing their heads. The most attractive captives would be tortured first and tortured worst. He would put their heads in a bag for future use. The day of retribution would mark the beginning of his war on women. Part of his plan consisted of attacking the Alpha Phi sorority. Like a page out of Ted Bundy's playbook, his plan included sneaking in at night and killing them in their sleep. He would go from there to his father's place, where he would kill Sumaya and Jazz. Next stop would be Del Playa Street. The following is what he wrote about his plans for Del Playa Street. Once I reach Del Playa Street, I will dump the bag of severed heads I had saved from my previous victims, proclaiming to everyone how much I've made them all suffer. Once they see all of their friends' heads roll onto the street, everyone will fear me as the powerful god I am. I will then start massacring everyone on Del Playa Street. I will pull up next to a house party and fire bullets at everyone partying on the front yard. I will specifically target the good-looking people and all of the couples. After I have destroyed a house party, I will continue down Del Playa, destroying everything and everyone. When I see the first police car come to their rescue, I will drive away as fast as I can, shooting and ramming anyone in my path until I find a suitable place to finally end my life. His methodology for committing suicide involved swallowing a gross of Vicodin and Xanax with alcohol. With all those ingredients in place, he would shoot himself in the head with both of his guns. The blaze without the glory. Elliot uploaded a few videos to YouTube to outline what he was going to do. He later removed them. Titles included, "I'm Awesome," and "Life is so unfair because girls don't want me." He wrote about the videos. I titled one of the videos I uploaded, "Why Do Girls Hate Me So Much?" in which I asked the entire population of women the question I've wanted to ask them for so many years. Why do they hate me so much? Why have they never fancied me? Why do they give their love and sex to other men, but not me, even though I deserve them more? In the video, I show that I am the perfect, magnificent gentleman, worthy of having a beautiful girlfriend, making the world see how unreasonable it is that I've had to struggle all my life to get a girlfriend. It is my attempt to reason with the female gender, to ask them why they have mistreated me. On April 24th, Elliot woke with a cold, so he postponed his massacre to May 24th. If only Elliot had been aware of the phenomenon of women who have hybristophilia. They are attracted to violent criminals and would no doubt have wanted to sleep with him if he had killed but spared himself. He was no dreamboat like Ted Bundy, but he would have gotten a few love letters. More from his manifesto. The ultimate evil behind sexuality is the human female. They are the main instigators of sex. They control which men get it and which men don't. Women are flawed creatures, and my mistreatment at their hands has made me realize this sad truth. There is something very twisted and wrong with the way their brains are wired. They think like beasts, and in truth they are beasts. Women are incapable of having morals or thinking rationally. They are completely controlled by their depraved emotions and vile sexual impulses. Because of this, the men who do get to experience the pleasures of sex and the privilege of breeding are the men who women are sexually attracted to, the stupid, degenerate, obnoxious men. I have observed this all my life. The most beautiful of women choose to mate with the most brutal of men, instead of magnificent gentlemen like myself. Women should not have the right to choose who to mate and breed with. That decision should be made for them by rational men of intelligence. If women continue to have rights, they will only hinder the advancement of the human race by breeding with degenerate men and creating stupid, degenerate offspring. This will cause humanity to become even more depraved with each generation. Women have more power in human society than they deserve, all because of sex. There is no creature more evil and depraved than the human female. Women are like a plague. They don't deserve to have any rights. Their wickedness must be contained in order to prevent future generations from falling to degeneracy. Women are vicious, evil, barbaric animals, and they need to be treated as such. In fully realizing these truths about the world, I have created the ultimate and perfect ideology of how a fair and pure world would work. In an ideal world, sexuality would not exist. It must be outlawed. In a world without sex, humanity will be pure and civilized. Men will grow up healthily without having to worry about such a barbaric act. All men will grow up fair and equal, because no man will be able to experience the pleasures of sex while others are denied it. The human race will evolve to an entirely new level of civilization, completely devoid of all the impurity and degeneracy that exists today. In order to completely abolish sex, women themselves would have to be abolished. All women must be quarantined like the plague they are, so that they can be used in a manner that actually benefits a civilized society. In order to carry this out, There must exist a new and powerful type of government, under the control of one divine ruler, such as myself. The ruler that establishes this new order would have complete control over every aspect of society, in order to direct it towards a good and pure place. At the disposal of this government, there needs to be a highly trained army of fanatically loyal troops, in order to enforce such revolutionary laws. The first strike against women will be to quarantine all of them in concentration camps. At these camps, the vast majority of the female population will be deliberately starved to death. That would be an efficient and fitting way to kill them all off. I would take great pleasure and satisfaction in condemning every single woman on earth to starve to death. I would have an enormous tower built just for myself, where I can oversee the entire concentration camp and gleefully watch them all die. If I can't have them, no one will. I'd imagine thinking to myself as I oversee this. Women represent everything that is unfair with this world, and in order to make the world a fair place, they must all be eradicated. A few women would be spared, however, for the sake of reproduction. These women would be kept and bred in secret labs. There they will be artificially inseminated with sperm samples in order to produce offspring. Their depraved nature will slowly be bred out of them in time. Future generations of men would be oblivious to these remaining women's existence, and that is for the best. If a man grows up without knowing of the existence of women, there will be no desire for sex. Sexuality will completely cease to exist. Love will cease to exist. There will no longer be any imprint of such concepts in the human psyche. It is the only way to purify the world. In such a pure world, the man's mind can develop to greater heights than ever before. Future generations will live their lives free of having to worry about the barbarity of sex and women, which will enable them to expand their intelligence and advance the human race to a state of perfect civilization. One day, a police officer showed up at Elliot's door. He was terrified. He was worried they somehow found out about his plan and the guns with which he intended to carry it out. It turned out his mother saw his YouTube videos and became worried he planned to kill himself. The police asked him if he did indeed plan to take his life. He told them his mother was overreacting and there was nothing to be concerned about. The police bought it and left. It was then when he removed the videos. Elliot uploaded one last video, which was seen by Peter, who became alarmed. A transcript from Elliot's monologue. Hi, Elliot Roger here. It has all had come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution, the day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. For the last 8 years of my life, ever since I hit puberty, I've been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because girls have never been attracted to me. Girls gave their affection and sex and love to other men, but never to me. I'm 22 years old, and I'm still a virgin. I've never even kissed a girl. I've been through college for 2.5 years, more than that actually, and I'm still a virgin. It has been very torturous. College is the time when everyone experiences those things such as sex and fun and pleasure. Within those years, I've had to rot in loneliness. It's not fair. You girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it. It's an injustice, a crime, because I don't know what you don't see in me. I'm the perfect guy, and yet you throw yourselves at these obnoxious men instead of me, the supreme gentleman. I will punish all of you for it. On the day of retribution, I'm going to enter the hottest sorority house of UCSB, and I will slaughter every spoiled, stuck-up blonde slut I see inside there. All those girls I've desired so much, they would have all rejected me and looked down upon me as an inferior man if I ever made a sexual advance toward them while they throw themselves at these obnoxious brutes. I'll take great pleasure in slaughtering all of you. You will finally see that I am, in truth, the superior one, the true alpha male. Yes, after I've annihilated every single girl in the sorority house, I will take to the streets of Isla Vista and slay every single person I see there. All those popular kids who live such lives of hedonistic pleasures, while I've had to rot in loneliness for all these years. They've all looked down upon me every time I tried to go out and join them. They've all treated me like a mouse. Well, now I will be a god compared to you. You will all be animals. You are animals. And I will slaughter you like animals. And I will be a god, exacting my retribution on all those who deserve it. You do deserve it, just for the crime of living a better life than me. All you popular kids, you've never accepted me, and now you will all pay for it. And girls, all I ever wanted was to love you and to be loved by you. I've wanted a girlfriend, I've wanted sex, I've wanted love, affection, adoration. You think I'm unworthy of it. That's a crime that can never be forgiven. If I can't have you girls, I will destroy you. You denied me a happy life, and in turn, I will deny all of you life. It's only fair. I hate all of you. Humanity is a disgusting, wretched, depraved species. If I had it in my power, I would stop at nothing to reduce every single one of you to mountains of skulls and rivers of blood. And rightfully so. You deserve to be annihilated, and I'll give that to you. You never showed me any mercy, and so I will show you none. You forced me to suffer all my life, and now I'll force you all suffer. I've waited a long time for this. I'll give you exactly what you deserve. All of you. All you girls who rejected me and looked down upon me and, treated me like scum while you gave yourselves to other men. And all of you men for living a better life than me. All of you sexually active men. I hate you. I hate all of you. I can't wait to give you exactly what you deserve. Utter annihilation. Elliot emailed his manifesto entitled My Twisted World to his parents, life coach, and a few other recipients. After Chin read it, she went to Elliot's YouTube channel and watched a video called Elliot Rogers' Retribution. Peter and Chin drove toward Elliot's apartment. Peter dialed and redialed Elliot's number repeatedly, but got no answer. Meanwhile, a report emerged on their phones about an active shooter. They called the local sheriff's office and told them who they were in relation to the shooter. They were told to go to a Home Depot parking lot and await further instructions. A sheriff turned up at the Home Depot parking lot and approached Peter and Chin. He said, "We've found a deceased person, and we found a license in his pocket that fits your son's description." This report on the day of retribution was broadcast by ABC News.
With 6 of its students dead, the University of California Santa Barbara community is in mourning. The gunman who methodically planned the attack chronicled his descent into a deranged rage. How did this young man, who seemed to have everything, become a mass murderer? Tonight, we take a close look at the clues and his parents' futile race to try to stop him. ABC's Cecilia Vega is in Santa Barbara.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution.
Is this the latest face of evil in America?
You forced me to suffer all my life, and now I'll make you all suffer.
An angry and psychologically twisted young man whose public rantings exploded into sheer terror in a quiet California community.
Shots fired.
Taking 6 young lives and injuring 13. 22-year-old Elliot Roger, the son of Hollywood privilege, but sexually frustrated. A virgin vowing revenge in a twisted video he posted Friday addressed at his perceived enemies, young women he says rejected him.
All those girls that I've desired so much, they would have all rejected me and looked down upon me as an inferior man if I ever made a sexual advance towards them.
Deep delusions that would turn deadly.
I hate all of you. I can't wait to give you exactly what you deserve.
And tonight, the University of California Santa Barbara shut down. Classes canceled, flags flying at half staff, a community in mourning. Thousands coming together for an emotional memorial service.
Let us cherish the moments that we've shared with them and be grateful to have had them in our lives as friends, as family, and as loved ones.
And now new details are emerging about Roger's life. His parents divorced. His father, Peter Roger, a respected director who worked on the Hunger Games. But their son Elliot lived his life as an angry outsider. A family spokesman telling ABC News Roger had been in therapy from 9 years old. But this painfully shy young man creating on video what he couldn't in life.
I've waited a long time for this.
Is the killer's attempt to recreate his persona in a sympathetic way and in a way where he can get understanding, relevance, meaning, where his life has no meaning at all.
This was a plan years in the making, executed methodically. The apparent revenge fantasy set in motion Friday night. At 9:17 p.m., Elliot Rogers' therapist calls Elliot's mother, Chin, alerting her to an email from her son with a manifesto called My Twisted World. 137 pages pouring from this tortured mind, idyllic childhood memories, painful teenage years, and finally, an elaborate plot to kill.
He's so invested in carrying out the mass killing that he'll sit down and write and edit and re-edit something that amounts to 140 pages, make a variety of different videos, and mobilize to a degree that this becomes a project, an ambition, a career path.
His mother, alarmed, checked her son's YouTube channel. Immediately, she called her ex-husband, and they raced to Santa Barbara, saying they call police along the way. But it's too late. The first 3 victims already dead. Roger's 2 roommates, James Cheng, Yuan Hong, and George Chen, along with their friend, Wai-Han David Wong, all stabbed to death in this apartment building. A death too terrible for George Chen's parents to even contemplate.
I just don't know why this happened to our son. It's crazy. This just doesn't make any sense.
At 9:27 p.m., the first reports of a mass shooting underway.
Shots fired, shots fired.
Just as soon as we heard the noise, it was so close and just so terrifying.
Roger's next target, a sorority. He says to take revenge against all the girls who he believed rejected him.
After I've annihilated every single girl in the sorority house, I'll take to the streets of Isla Vista and slay every single person I see there.
This young man seems to have had a complete lack of skills and ability to interact with anybody, let alone the opposite sex.
He banged on the door of Alpha Phi. When nobody let him in, he shot 3 women around the corner, killing 2, Catherine Cooper and Veronica Weiss. But Roger's rampage wasn't over. 9:30 p.m., he opens fire at this deli filled with students. Surveillance video shows people diving for cover.
I honestly thought that was my last moment. I thought I was going to die.
His final victim, Christopher Michaels Martinez.
I gave him CPR for 10 minutes before the paramedics showed up.
Our son was the most important thing in the world to all of us. He was our only child, and he was so much a part of our lives that it's hard to imagine how things are going to be like now that he's gone.
At the end, Roger, driving in his black BMW, plowed down bikers and indiscriminately shot pedestrians.
Some guy ran in our house bleeding everywhere. He said he got run over by a car.
Nick Pasachuk was skateboarding with friends when Roger rammed into him, sending him flying in the air.
Both his legs are broken. His left leg was completely shattered.
By 9:33, it was over. Roger and police in a gunfight. The killer drives away, but then crashes his BMW, apparently turning the gun on himself. Police say they found 400 rounds of ammunition in Roger's car, and that he carried out his shootings with legally purchased semi-automatic handguns. He was under psychiatric care, his parents saying they did everything they could to help a shy, reclusive son, even reporting his disturbing videos to police last month. Police went to his home, but say they found no cause to search it or order a mental evaluation.
Because of the narrowness of the law, danger to self, others, or grave disability, those officers acted in accordance with the law.
But in his manifesto, Roger wrote, "If the police would have searched my room, found all of my guns and weapons, I would have been thrown in jail, denied of the chance to exact revenge on my enemies. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, but it was so close.
The problem is that we send the authorities, who are not mental health professionals, to check on this young man, and it takes a very trained eye and a lot of skill to decide whether or not this person is a risk to hurting themselves or hurting others.
His anger at sexual rejection morphing to misogynistic diatribes.
Girls gave their affection and sex and love to other men, but never to me.
And now, a worldwide outpouring, more than 1 million tweets decrying a culture that turns women into sex objects. #YesAllWomen, now fighting back.
Because every woman I know has experienced some form of sexual harassment, abuse, or assault, myself included.
And on campus tonight, remembering those lost, sharing the pain, and searching for answers.
If you agree that the people in Washington should hear that not one more person should have to die because of this ridiculous situation, then when I raise my hand, I want you to shout so loud that they're going to hear you. Yeah! Not one more! Not one more!
Elliot Rodger's rampage made quite an impression on the incel community. They bestowed upon him the honorific of Supreme Gentleman and Saint Elliot. They praised him and his actions. Some mused about carrying out a similar attack and referred to such an initiative as going ER. They now refer to May 23rd as Saint Elliot's Day. On a Reddit thread, one incel wrote, "May he rest in peace. Let us not be sad. Today is a day to celebrate the retribution." They read his manifesto and characterized it as a work of genius. They cite the work as a Bible of sorts. On a message board, one incel wrote, "All violence, random attacks, and terrorism are done by men who cannot find GFs, and thus women are directly responsible for all of it. The only way to fix this problem is to take away women's rights and adopt a system of equal redistribution of women." The Southern Poverty Law Center labeled Elliot Rodger the first alt-right killer. Part 2. Alec Manassian. Some of Elliot's disciples were inspired to carry out attacks of their own. April 23, 2018. Failed military recruit Alex Manassian rented a van and took to the streets of the Toronto borough of North York. He jumped a curb and drove down a sidewalk, deliberately running down pedestrians. He killed 10 people and critically injured 14. 7 minutes after he hit his last victim, he was taken into custody. Shortly before he initiated the massacre, Manassian posted a message online that went, "Private Recruit, Manassian Infantry 00010, wishing to speak to Sergeant 4chan, please. C2324961. The Incel Rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. All hail the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Rodger." According to his family, he demonstrated symptoms of autism or its variant, Asperger's syndrome. Peter Rodger commented on this incident. "It's not only devastating for the victims in Toronto, it's also devastating for Elliot's victims. To bring this all up again and make a hero out of a very disturbed individual." This is a segment about incel culture from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's The Fifth Estate.
We're setting up for an interview to help shed some light on a dark place.
256 gig per drive, and I've got 2 of these drives.
In a virtual world that's hard to penetrate.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
So, before we get going, what would you like me to call you?
Toby's fine.
Okay. Well, good to meet you, Toby. I'm Mark.
Nice to meet you, Mark.
Why, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of
Egg wars.
Toby is part of the fire and the fury in the Fellowship of Involuntary Celibates, or Incels.
There's fucking so much fucking rage in my fucking body.
Men who have been rejected by women, and now they want their revenge.
Women are not fit to vote. They just follow wherever they are led like dogs.
And guys like him are getting more attention because sometimes the virtual world he lives in collides with our real world.
I think all men, deep down, are really pissed off by women.
I wish you all were dead. You're all just pieces of shit to me.
And the consequences can be deadly.
You're all going to die. Pew, 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 pew.
April 23rd, 2018, North Toronto. 8 minutes of terror.
At about 1:30 p.m., a white van jumped the curb and plowed into a number of pedestrians.
Just pure carnage.
A rented van with a driver on a mission to kill.
He turned left a little bit to hit the lady on the sidewalk. That's when I saw he was very angry and scared.
And kill he did. 10 people would die. 8 were women.
That could have been us.
Another 16 were injured, some critically.
And we tried to help her, like, to stop the bleeding. No, get down! Get down!
And yet many people may remember the incident not for how it started, but for how unlikely it ended.
You guys get down.
Peacefully. Police arrested 25-year-old Alec Manassian, a man with no criminal history. His trial will be in 2020. Until then, his defense a mystery.
These are not the kinds of things that we expect to happen in this city.
Officials were quick to label the attack an isolated incident, perpetrated by a lone wolf. The crisis, it appeared, was over.
There would appear to be no national security connection to this particular incident.
But what could motivate this kind of madness? Manassian left one alarming clue.
The accused is alleged to have posted a cryptic message on Facebook minutes before he began driving the rented van.
The Incel Rebellion has already begun. All hail the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Rodger. And that started us on our investigation, where we find 10 months after the attack, the spirit of Alec Manassian and the Incel Rebellion lives on.
Hey, Elliot Rodger here.
You can trace the trail of dead back to this guy.
I've experienced nothing but loneliness and misery. And my problem is girls.
He's the one Manassian allegedly praised moments before the van attack.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity. Against all of you. See? Look at how fabulous I look.
The 22-year-old university student posted this video shortly before going on his own killing spree back in 2014.
And I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde slut. You will finally see that I am, in truth, the superior one. The true alpha male.
He killed 6 people, injured 14 others, before killing himself. His killing spree didn't only inspire Manassian. My colleague has been monitoring incel chat groups for months, and because she's a woman, making her a target of their hate, we have cloaked her identity.
If you got nothing to lose, then going ER is legit. But who are they encouraging here?
Anyone who posts about thinking about doing something like this, or someone who posts about wanting to kill themselves, they encourage them to do this instead.
Instead of killing themselves, they should go out and kill women.
Yeah.
Going ER is an incel term encouraging others to go on their own killing spree.
It's a much better alternative than ending up another forgotten suicide statistic. Helps them identify with a movement that empathizes with their plight. Wow.
Did this online community, these keyboard warriors, inspire Manassian to kill? And did he feel at home in their world of anger and isolation? Manassian's past is shrouded by the fact he seemed to have few friends.
What's it feel for you to be coming back to your old school?
It's weird. I haven't walked down this road in a very long time.
Oh, no?
Yeah, no.
To find out more about him, I meet up with a classmate who spent 4 years at high school with Manassian.
Yeah, he was constantly bullied. Yeah, he was constantly picked on by other students, other kids.
She's asked to remain anonymous because she doesn't want to be associated with this tragedy.
They had a nickname for him.
What was his nickname?
They called him Chewbacca.
Chewbacca?
Yeah.
Like from Star Wars?
Yes.
And why was that?
Because he had a thing where he would meow at people or try to bite them. But I think he did that because he thought other people thought it was funny, or he was trying to make friends, but he did it in such a way that
it just isolated him even
more.
She says Manassian was in special needs classes in high school, his odd behavior making him a target.
I would walk to my car.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would just constantly see kids just picking on him, even surrounding him and kind of provoking him into making those meowing noises.
When did you put 2 and 2 together that you'd gone to school with this guy?
It wasn't until hours after that. I didn't even recognize the name because nobody knew his name. His name was Chewbacca. He didn't even have a name in school.
Fast forward 10 years to Manassian wrapping up his computer studies in college. In a group chat with classmates, he wrote, "Finally finished college. Fuck you all and good riddance." That was 4 days before the van attack. So what can trigger an attack like this? I'm off to meet a therapist who deals with patients who've been bullied and rejected.
Killing school timetable.
Robin Holloway shows me drawings by one of his patients depicting his violent fantasies.
So he goes to New York. David spent all day in New York killing the people.
His patient is autistic. It's believed Manassian is too.
I think a lot of them carry around feelings of being treated unjustly and unfairly because of all the rejections they feel they have experienced over time.
Holloway insists people on the autism spectrum are not more violent than others, but they are more vulnerable, making them prey to groups like incels.
Finally, you can be empowered. You're no longer a victim. You can now be the bully. You can do something. I know what I have to do to get vengeance for how I've been treated for so many years. So that can be the tipping point.
The vengeance of that van attack inspired this song and video. A tribute to Alec Manassian. We wanted to find the man who wrote the song, and that's what led us to Toby Reynolds, aka Eggman or Egg White.
This is your boy, Egg White, aka Pussy Obliterator.
He live streams, essentially online rants, for hours at a time. He's been dubbed a messiah by his incel audience.
Rest in peace to Elliot Roger. You know how we get down. We're rocking the special shirt today.
If we can't talk to Manassian, perhaps we can learn something from a member of the movement that might have helped inspire him.
Have you had a lot of that in your life, though, where you felt that you were alienated or marginalized?
Long story short, yes, I think it was a recurring theme that I was kind of generally an outsider looking in.
He's 28, out of school, a video gamer with no job and no hope for his future.
What did the girls think of you? Did you have any girlfriends?
All the women who had rejected me. I was 23 years old at the time, going on 24, never had a girlfriend. I was just a hideous mutant monster freak and reviled upon the world. Every time I stepped outside, you know, people were probably vomiting just looking at me. That's just how I felt.
His Manassian song has given him what he craves, attention. Though banned by YouTube, the song lives on with more than 200,000 views. So what do we do with the Tobys of the world?
So we can't just let these kinds of things go on the forums that we see them in. We need to call them out. We need to have discussions about them.
And when we come back, I'll do just that.
But don't you see that this is part of the problem? That this is feeding the resentment. This is feeding the misogyny, and at worst, this is feeding the violence.
After I've annihilated every single girl in the sorority house, I'll take to the streets of Isla Vista and slay every single person I see there.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people. With an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds, I think I can get done. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida.
Nicholas Cruz carried through on his threat. He's been charged with killing 17 people. It's tempting to dismiss these men as lone wolves, not driven by an ideology like conventional terrorists. But are these acts of violence really that random? Our quest to learn more about incels brings us to Grinnell, Iowa, a graceful town built around its 175-year-old college named after the town. The school's motto? Truth and humanity. We've come here looking for a little of both.
You can see that there's a conversation amongst the incels. How does your inceldom affect you? What does it mean to you?
I'm here with Ross Henfler, a prof who specializes in deviance and youth subculture.
I think it's kind of gives us a nice window into the rejection and the depression that some of the incels are really feeling.
He's been tracking incel chatter.
In this post with the avatar of Elliot Rodger, one of the heroes, gives you a nice example of how mass killers can be venerated in this community.
So what led you to incels?
Incels is just a contemporary example of what I've been interested in all along, a group of men that are engaged in kind of a backlash against women and who are struggling with what it means to be a man in an environment where they sort of feel their moorings have come unglued.
Why is that turning to violence?
So the vast majority of incels are not violent, they're not acting out their violence.
But from what I've seen is when there is an act of violence, it's celebrated and encouraged for others to follow. Why is there that celebration of violence?
I think that the Elliot Rodgers and other mass killers, they do sometimes take on a mythical quality because for some incels, they embody the ultimate form of resistance against a feminist culture that doesn't value them for who they are.
We just wanted to show you something that we had come across. This is a tribute to Alec Manassian song. So what do you see when you see that?
I see a lot of anger, but the fact that he can expect to express these very misogynist, very violent sentiments and can expect to get celebrated for that from a certain constituency, that's terrifying.
But if you were to have an opportunity to speak to this individual, where would you start?
I would just want to listen for a few minutes, honestly. I have a lot of things I could say and a lot of criticism I would offer, but I would want to hear what led you to produce something like this.
Well, that's what I wanted to know too, when I talked to the guy who wrote it, Toby Reynolds.
I mean, certainly this to me sounds like a call to arms for others.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that aspect, but I definitely did not have that in mind.
But online, in the incel community, there's a lot of talk of violence. There's a lot of talk of retribution. There's a lot of talk of misogyny. And when I look at your song, it just seems to fit right into it. Don't you see this as part of the problem?
Am I adding fuel to the fire by, doing something like that? I would say quite possibly. And I have considered, stepping away from being online and kind of having a presence online. I feel like, if there's young, impressionable men, I don't necessarily want to, steer them wrong.
And Elliot Rodger or Alec Manassian, they get treated as heroes by some people in the incel community. Don't you think that this can incite other lonely, desperate people to kill?
I would say definitely so, yeah. But there's people out there that are completely shut out of the world and they want to react in a violent way.
And we see evidence of that time and time again on the very public incel forums.
I'm just struck by how much there is here, how many people are weighing in about Alec and actually putting him on a pedestal.
And it's interesting, in a lot of ways, people on here seem to think he's more of a hero than Elliot Rodger is.
A hero or a zero? 63% say he's a hero.
In just 10 months, it seems Manassian has gone from a follower to a foot soldier in the incel rebellion.
And one of the first things I found was this, and its poster.
Wow.
And has this van attack added more fuel to an already burning fire?
Are they really a lone wolf when they're operating in a community like this? It seems to be that they are part of something bigger here.
If we just focus on that action and that moment, and maybe even his history, we miss this larger community that's reinforcing the beliefs that are underlying those violent acts.
Absolutely.
And that's a mistake. We can minimize the kinds of context that produce the kinds of violence that we're seeing here. But that takes hard work, and it's a lot more complicated than describing someone as a lone wolf or mentally ill.
Incels are one pillar in a larger community of right-wing extremists in the US, Canada, and beyond.
I'm wondering how big of a threat do you see right-wing extremism in Canada today?
Barbara Perry says it's time for authorities in Canada to wake up to the threat of the far-right movement. She's an expert in hate crime.
If you look at the sort of successive reports on the terrorist threat in Canada, there's generally either the far right isn't mentioned or they're dismissed out of hand as, you know, not a threat, not organized, not coherent, and therefore, you know, not a risk.
And do you think they are?
Oh, absolutely, I think they are. We identified just what we're looking at between 1985 and 2014, 2015, over 120 incidents of violence associated with the far right. During that same period of time, there were 7 incidents of Islamist-inspired extremism. So I think that really puts it in context what the risk is.
She considers right-wing extremists a clear and present danger to national security.
Our national security doesn't just rely on or revolve around physical security, but also the sense of inclusion. The divisiveness that is a result of hate crime, this is also very damaging, very harmful to national security in a very different way. But anything that weakens our sense of togetherness, our sense of unity, you know, weakens our capacity, weakens our resilience to withstand other kinds of attacks.
And it may sound subtle, but even Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale mentioned right-wing violence recently in a speech about people who've become radicalized to extreme violence.
The van attack along Yonge Street in Toronto earlier last year had those kinds of roots. So we have seen instances in Canada where extreme right-wing organizations have been active.
Scared of me. I think she's scared of me.
So where do we start? Well, it may be difficult to confront an entire movement, but what about trying to reach one person at a time? Someone like Toby.
Why would you want to be associated in any way with any kind of community that promotes this kind of violence against women?
I differ from, you know, some of the extreme members, because even if I was at some kind of place where I was just that far, like, extremist into it, I don't know, but I wouldn't say I disavow the incel people. That would be like me turning my back on just the average guy who's kind of a bumbling type of individual who's kind of like a social outcast.
I just want to kill so many fucking people.
But don't you see here that this is part of the problem? That this is feeding the resentment. This is feeding the misogyny, and at worst, this is feeding the violence.
I mean, I do, and I think that probably the best solution to my involvement is to sort of just kind of, you know, step away from the scene, kind of whatever problems I have personally, to kind of take them away from, you know, the magnifying glass of sorts.
We talked for nearly 3 hours, and then something unexpected happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. I only see it as just music, you know. But you're right, though. You know, you're very right, and I do think that this conversation today, I think it's making my mind up, kind of where I've been thinking would be a beneficial thing for me to kind of wrap this to basically to not be this anymore. I do thank you for, you know, basically kind of giving me some, I think, possibly sorely needed inflection and self-reflection that I haven't maybe had. So I appreciate that. I do.
By taking Toby out of his echo chamber, it appeared there was hope for redemption. After our interview, he stopped live streaming, deleted his Twitter account, and the link to that Manassian video.
So in any case, to sum it up here, pretty much, I guess I'm going dark. I'm going whoosh. I don't know. Hopefully I don't end up in Gitmo for making a rap song.
Part 3, Scott Bierly. November 2nd, 2018. Scott shot 2 women and injured 4 other women and a man before killing himself at Hot Yoga Tallahassee in Florida. He had a history of arrests for molesting women in public by grabbing their buttocks. There were several other incidents where he was not reported. In 2014, he made videos in which he expressed his contempt and hatred for women. He was angry about not having a girlfriend. He mentioned Elliot Rodger in one video. He dedicated one video to young men he characterized as being in, quote, the disposition of Elliot Rodger, of not getting any. No love, no nothing. The following is a clip about the incident from the Today Show.
The police investigating this say it appears that the gunman legally owned the pistol that he used to kill. Witnesses say that he came here to this yoga studio as if he was going to be a student taking a class, walked in, put his gym bag down, then reached in, pulled out a pistol, and began shooting.
This morning, troubling new details are emerging about the man responsible for the deadly shooting at a Tallahassee yoga studio. Police identifying the gunman as 40-year-old Scott Paul Bierly. Authorities say he killed 2 people on Friday and shot 5 others before taking his own life. It appears Bierly posted dozens of misogynistic and racist videos on YouTube. The videos, which were not widely viewed, have been removed by YouTube because of their offensive content. According to arrest records, Bierly had a history of harassing women in Florida. According to one Tallahassee police incident report, in 2012, he was arrested for battery for grabbing girls' butts near FSU's campus. A 2016 arrest report for battery states that Bierly approached a woman at a Tallahassee area pool and slapped her butt, grabbed it, and shook it. Both charges were eventually dropped. Sunday night, tears and prayers at a community gathering to remember the victims. 61-year-old FSU faculty member Dr. Nancy Van Vessem and 21-year-old FSU student Maura Binkley.
It's parents' worst nightmare.
Maura's father, Jeff Binkley, attended the vigil with Maura's mother.
It's inexplicable. It's incomprehensible.
With this horrible experience,
yes,
you want to say?
I want to say enough is enough.
Police say at this stage in the investigation, there appears to be no link between the victims and the shooter. Do you want to know why?
I think at some point the why is not terribly relevant to me, except in the context of this, that there were certain behaviors that were exhibited over time. When people exhibit those, we have to come up with a better way to address them, to protect the innocent people in our society.
Maura's father says his daughter, who was close to graduation, was hoping to get a Fulbright scholarship or go to Germany to continue her studies to keep her German fluency and improve it. The 5 victims who were wounded in the shooting here have now all been released from the hospital.
Part 4, Christopher Cleary. January 2019. Christopher Cleary was arrested after posting a message on Facebook which included the statement, "I'm planning on shooting up a public place soon and being the next mass shooter and killing as many girls as I see." He had never had a girlfriend and was a virgin, therefore, he felt somebody other than himself had to pay. Like any incel, he blamed women. He was a troubled individual who had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. More from his Facebook statement. "All I wanted was a girlfriend. Not 1,000, not a bunch of hoes, not money, none of that. All I wanted was to be loved, yet no one cares about me. I'm 27 years old, and I've never had a girlfriend before, and I'm still a virgin. This is why I'm planning on shooting up a public place soon, and being the next mass shooter, 'cause I'm ready to die, and all the girls that turn me down is going to make it right by killing as many girls as I see." Fortunately, this never came to pass. Bad things happen when men don't get laid. You can certainly go crazy from loneliness. You cave in on yourself, and then you're completely out of touch with the outside world. Anybody who has become trapped inside of themselves should use that time for reflection and the development of self-awareness. They should consider why they are in such little demand socially and sexually. An evaluation of that kind would have been very helpful to Elliot Rodger and would have prevented a tragedy that destroyed so many lives. A sentiment like the following from My Twisted World is a mayday for anybody who has spent too much time alone and whose self-perception has been poisoned by subjectivity and self-loathing. I'm not a part of the human race. Humanity has rejected me. The females of the human species have never wanted to mate with me, so how could I possibly consider myself part of humanity? Humanity has never accepted me among them, and now I know why. I am more than human. I am superior to them all. I am Elliot Rodger, magnificent, glorious, supreme, eminent, divine. I am the closest thing there is to a living God. Humanity is a disgusting, depraved, and evil species. It is my purpose to punish them all. I will purify the world of everything that is wrong with it. On the day of retribution, I will truly be a powerful God, punishing everyone I deem to be impure and depraved. Elliot, your actions have only demonstrated that you are among the worst of our species. You won't be missed. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.